He thought the storm was her biggest threat, until 5 riders emerged from the darkness. What the outlaws didn't expect was the shadow watching them from above, one who would change everything the moment he stepped into the light. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The Arizona Territory, 1875. The merciless summer sun beat down upon the parched earth, creating shimmering waves of heat that distorted the distant horizon. Among the rugged terrain of the Superstition Mountains, a lone Apache warrior moved with the silence and precision of a mountain lion. His name was Dakota, meaning friend to all in his native tongue, though few white settlers would ever come to know this about him. Dakota crouched low on a rocky outcropping, his dark eyes scanning the valley below. At 30 winters old, his face already bore the weathered lines of a man who had known both battle and peace. The tribal markings adorning his chest told stories of his courage and skill, while the single eagle feather in his hair spoke of his respected status among his people. He had been tracking a small group of riders since dawn, men whose reputation for violence had reached even the remote Apache village where his people now lived in uneasy truce with the U.S. cavalry. They called themselves the Driscoll Gang, outlaws who preyed upon stagecoaches, homesteads, and anyone unfortunate enough to cross their path. They travel like wounded wolves, Dakota murmured to himself, leaving only destruction behind them. His tribe's medicine man had sent him on this vision quest 3 days ago, instructing him to seek guidance from the spirits regarding the future of their people. But the signs had led him here, to this vantage point, on this particular day. Miles away in the small settlement of Redemption, Emma Sullivan stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her father's general store. At 24, she had already endured more hardship than most women twice her age. The death of her mother from tuberculosis when Emma was just 16 had left her to care for her father and younger brother alone. "Emma, the supply wagon from Tucson is arriving," her father called from downstairs. "Coming, Pa," she replied, quickly pinning up her chestnut hair and smoothing her simple cotton dress. The bell above the shop door jangled as Emma descended the stairs. Her father, Joseph Sullivan, was already greeting the supply wagon driver, a stout man named Hank who made the journey from Tucson each month. "Brought your supplies, Joe," Hank announced, wiping sweat from his brow with a kerchief, "and a stack of letters that's been piling up at the Tucson post. Army patrol's been delayed on account of Apache sightings near the pass." Emma felt a familiar knot of anxiety form in her stomach. Relations between the settlers and the Apache tribes remained tense, despite the peace treaties. Stories of raids and atrocities committed by both sides were common, though Emma had come to believe that many tales were exaggerated to justify further violence. "Any word on when the new school teacher is arriving?" Emma asked, hoping to change the subject. The town had been without a proper teacher for nearly 6 months. "That's partly why I'm late," Hank replied with a grim expression. "Found her wagon about 10 miles south. Driscoll's boys got to her, no survivors." Emma's hand flew to her mouth. "Those monsters," she whispered. Her father placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "The marshal's been tracking them for weeks, but they're like ghosts. Here one day, gone the next. Someone needs to stop them," Emma said, her voice hardening. Little did she know how prophetic her words would prove to be. As the day wore on, Emma helped her father unload the supplies and organize the new inventory. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising a rare summer storm. "You should head home before that rain hits," Joseph told his daughter as they finished for the day. Emma lived in a small cabin on the outskirts of town, a property left to her by her late aunt. "I'll be fine, Pa," she assured him, kissing his cheek. "I'll see you tomorrow." The wind had picked up considerably by the time Emma mounted her mare, Penny, for the ride home. The first drops of rain began to fall as she urged the horse into a trot, eager to reach her cabin before the downpour. She never saw the riders until they surrounded her. "Well, look what we've found ourselves, boys," drawled a tall man with a jagged scar running down his left cheek. Lyle Driscoll. "A pretty little thing all alone in the coming storm." Emma's blood ran cold as 4 more riders appeared, forming a circle around her. Each man wore the same hungry look, like wolves cornering a wounded deer. "Please," Emma managed to say, "I have nothing of value. Just let me pass. Driscoll's laughter was like broken glass. "Oh, I think you underestimate your value, miss. Ain't that right, boys?" The men's answering chuckles sent shivers down Emma's spine. She knew the stories of what happened to women who encountered the Driscoll gang. None of those stories ended well. "Get her off that horse," Driscoll ordered, and two men moved toward Emma. From his hidden position, Dakota watched the scene unfold with growing anger. The Great Spirit had led him here for a reason, and now that purpose was clear. These men, the same outlaws he had been tracking, were about to commit an atrocity against an innocent woman. Among his people, women were respected as life-givers, as the backbone of the tribe. To witness such disrespect awakened something primal within him. Without hesitation, Dakota knocked an arrow to his bow and took aim. The first arrow found its mark in the chest of the outlaw reaching for Emma's reins. Before the others could react, a second arrow pierced the throat of another gang member. "Apache!" one of the men shouted, drawing his revolver. Dakota was already moving, sliding down the rocky slope with the agility of a mountain cat. He loosed two more arrows in rapid succession, each finding its target with deadly accuracy. Driscoll, seeing half his gang fall in mere seconds, grabbed Emma and pulled her from her horse, using her as a shield. "Show yourself, Injun!" he shouted, pressing his revolver against Emma's temple. "Or the girl dies!" Emma struggled against Driscoll's iron grip, terror and defiance warring within her. The storm had broken fully now, rain pouring down in sheets, turning the dusty ground to mud beneath their feet. Lightning flashed, illuminating the figure that seemed to materialize from the shadows. Emma gasped at the sight of the Apache warrior standing before them, bow drawn, his dark eyes fixed with deadly intent upon Driscoll. "Let her go," Dakota commanded in perfect English, his voice carrying despite the storm. "Your fight is with me now." The rain pelted down mercilessly as Driscoll tightened his grip on Emma, the cold steel of his revolver pressing harder against her temple. The outlaw's breath came in ragged gasps, a mixture of fear and rage evident in his wild eyes. Four of his men lay motionless in the mud, their blood washing away in the downpour. "Back off, savage," Driscoll spat, his voice cracking with panic. "I'll kill her. I swear I will." Emma stood frozen, rainwater streaming down her face mixing with tears she refused to shed. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she locked eyes with the Apache warrior standing before them. There was something in his gaze, a calm certainty that seemed to cut through the chaos of the moment. "You are already dead," Dakota stated simply, his bow still drawn. "You just don't know it yet." A flash of lightning illuminated the scene, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. In that split second of brilliance, Driscoll's remaining gang member, who had been circling behind Dakota, raised his pistol to fire. With a fluidity that defied human limitation, Dakota pivoted and released his arrow. It struck the outlaw between the eyes before he could pull the trigger. As Driscoll's attention wavered for just a heartbeat, Emma saw her chance. She drove her elbow hard into his ribs and dropped to the ground. The shot went wild as Driscoll staggered backward. Before he could regain his balance, Dakota was upon him, tackling the outlaw to the mud. The two men grappled fiercely, rolling through the rain-soaked earth. Driscoll managed to land a solid blow to Dakota's jaw, but the Apache warrior barely seemed to notice. With practiced precision, Dakota locked his arm around Driscoll's throat, applying pressure to the sides of his neck. The outlaw thrashed and clawed at Dakota's arms, but his movements gradually weakened until he slumped into unconsciousness. Dakota rose to his feet, binding Driscoll's hands and feet with leather straps from his pouch. Only then did he turn his attention back to Emma, who was staring at him with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Are you harmed?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Emma shook her head, rain dripping from her sodden hair. "No, thanks to you." She took a tentative step forward. You saved my life. The Great Spirit guided me here," Dakota replied, looking up at the stormy sky. There was purpose in this meeting. A groan from Driscoll interrupted them. The outlaw was regaining consciousness, hatred burning in his eyes as he glared at them. "He needs to face justice," Emma said, her voice finding its strength again. "The Marshal in Redemption has been hunting him for months." Dakota nodded. "We will take him there." As the storm began to ease, they gathered the horses, securing Driscoll to his saddle. Emma's mare, Penny, had fortunately not strayed far during the commotion. They began the journey back to Redemption, the setting sun occasionally breaking through the dissipating clouds. "My name is Emma Sullivan," she offered as they rode side by side, Driscoll's horse tethered behind them. "I am called Dakota," he responded after a moment's hesitation. "It means friend to all in my language, though few white people have ever asked." "Well, Dakota, friend to all," Emma said with the ghost of a smile. "I'm certainly glad for your friendship today." They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Emma studied her rescuer from the corner of her eye. His profile was strong and proud, his eyes alert to every movement around them. Though she had been raised on stories that painted the Apache as savages, she saw nothing but dignity and honor in the man beside her. "Your English is perfect," she observed. "Better than some folks in town, I'd wager." A hint of what might have been amusement crossed Dakota's face. "I was educated at the mission school when I was young, before I returned to my people." "Returned? By choice?" Dakota's expression darkened slightly. The white man's world had little room for an Apache who could quote Shakespeare. "I belonged with my tribe." Emma fell silent, struck by the complexity of the man beside her. Their arrival at the outskirts of Redemption was met with immediate alarm. A man working in a field spotted them and ran toward town, no doubt to spread word of an Apache approaching. "Perhaps I should leave you here," Dakota suggested, reining his horse to a stop. "Nonsense," Emma replied firmly. "You're bringing in Lyle Driscoll. The marshal will want to thank you personally." They continued into town, where a small crowd had already gathered in the main street. Marshal Thomas Blackwood stood at the front, his hand resting on his holstered revolver. Emma's father pushed through the crowd, his face pale with worry. "Emma," he called out, "are you all right?" "I'm fine, Pa," she assured him, dismounting carefully. "Thanks to Dakota. He saved me from Driscoll and his gang when they attacked me on the trail." All eyes turned to the bound and bloodied figure of Lyle Driscoll, then back to the Apache warrior who had delivered him. Marshal Blackwood stepped forward, suspicion warring with gratitude on his weathered face. "This true, Driscoll. This Apache saved the lady from you and your boys." Driscoll spat blood onto the dirt. "He ambushed us, killed my men. He's a murdering savage and—" "He's a liar," Emma interrupted firmly. "Dakota saved my life. Driscoll and his men were going to—" Her voice faltered, unable to speak the words. The marshal's expression hardened. "Get this piece of filth to a cell," he ordered his deputies, who moved forward to take Driscoll. "He'll hang for his crimes come morning." As the outlaw was led away, hurling threats and obscenities, the marshal turned his attention back to Dakota. "Seems we owe you a debt, mister," he said cautiously. "Though I'm curious what brings an Apache warrior so close to our settlement." "I follow the signs the spirits send," Dakota replied simply. "Today they led me to stop a great wrong." The townspeople murmured among themselves, some with fear, others with begrudging respect. Emma's father stepped forward, extending his hand to Dakota. "Joseph Sullivan, Emma's father, I don't have words enough to thank you for what you've done." After a moment's hesitation, Dakota clasped the offered hand. "No thanks are needed. I did what any man of honor would do." "At least stay for a meal," Emma suggested, "and rest before you continue your journey." Marshal Blackwood frowned. "Don't know if that's wise, Miss Sullivan. No offense to our guest here, but tensions with the Apache are high right now." "He saved my life," Emma stated firmly, "and he'll be welcome at our table. Anyone who has a problem with that can answer to me." The conviction in her voice seemed to settle the matter. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Dakota found himself being led toward the Sullivans' home above the general store. Something stirred within him, a feeling he could not name. For years he had walked between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. But in Emma's unwavering gaze, he sensed something he had not expected to find among the white settlers: acceptance. Night fell over Redemption, bringing with it an uneasy quiet. In the small jail, Lyle Driscoll sat seething in his cell, already planning the vengeance he would take, on the town, on the girl, and especially on the Apache who had humiliated him. What the people of Redemption didn't know was that the rest of Driscoll's gang, another 6 hardened killers, were camped just a day's ride away, waiting for their leader's return, and they would not wait much longer. Dawn broke over Redemption, with a golden hue that belied the tension simmering beneath the town's quiet facade. Dakota stood on the small balcony outside the Sullivans' spare room, where he had spent the night at Emma's insistence. His dark eyes scanned the horizon, a sense of foreboding settling over him like a shroud. The spirits were restless. Danger was approaching. Inside, Emma moved about the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The events of the previous day had left her shaken, yet strangely alive with purpose. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the moment when Dakota had appeared like an avenging spirit from the storm to save her. There was something about him, something that defied the stories she had heard all her life about the savage Apache. A gentle knock at the door drew her attention. Her father entered, looking tired but resolute. "Marshall's preparing for the hanging," Joseph said quietly. "Half the town's already gathering." Emma set down the coffee pot with more force than necessary. "And the other half is probably hiding in their homes, afraid of the Apache who did their marshal's job for him." Joseph sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Can't blame folks for being cautious, Emma. The wounds between our peoples run deep. Dakota saved me, Pa. He could have just ridden past. Left me to—" She couldn't finish the thought. "I know, child. And I'll be grateful to him till the day I die." Joseph glanced toward the balcony where Dakota's silhouette was visible. "But he's caught between two worlds now. The army won't take kindly to an Apache warrior wandering free, especially one capable of taking down 5 white men. Outlaws or not." As if summoned by their conversation, Dakota stepped back inside. His face was impassive, but Emma had begun to recognize the subtle shifts in his expression that betrayed his thoughts. "Something's wrong," she said, not a question but a statement. Dakota nodded. "Driscoll's gang, they are coming." Joseph straightened. "How can you know that?" "The dust on the eastern horizon. Too much for traders, too organized for travelers." Dakota's gaze met Emma's. "They come for vengeance. We need to warn the marshal," Joseph said, already moving toward the door. The town square was crowded when they arrived. A gallows had been hastily constructed overnight, and Lyle Driscoll stood upon it, hands bound behind him, a noose around his neck. Marshal Blackwood was reading the list of charges to the assembled townspeople. "Murder, robbery, assault," the marshal's voice carried across the hushed crowd. "Marshal," Joseph called out, pushing through the onlookers with Emma and Dakota close behind. "Marshal, we've got trouble coming." Blackwood paused, irritation crossing his weathered face at the interruption. His expression darkened further when he saw Dakota. "What kind of trouble, Sullivan?" "Driscoll's gang," Emma interjected. Dakota spotted them approaching from the east. A slow, malicious smile spread across Driscoll's face. "Told you they'd come for me," he taunted. "My boys are gonna paint this town red with your blood." Murmurs of fear rippled through the crowd. Blackwood signaled to his 2 deputies. "How many?" he demanded, addressing Dakota directly for the first time. 6 riders, heavily armed. They will be here within the hour." Blackwood cursed under his breath. With only himself and 2 deputies, the town was severely outgunned. "Sullivan, gather any men who can handle a rifle. Barricade the main street." He turned to his deputies. "Finish this hanging now, then take positions at the north and south ends of town." "Wait," Dakota said, his voice commanding attention despite its quietness. "Keeping him alive may be your advantage." "What do you mean?" Blackwood asked, suspicion evident in his tone. "His men come for him. Use that." Dakota's eyes narrowed as he studied the marshal. "Unless you wish to see more innocent blood spilled today?" A tense silence fell over the gathering. Finally, Blackwood nodded curtly. "Get him back to the jail. We'll use him as leverage." As Driscoll was led away, his laughter echoed ominously. "You're all dead already," he called out. "All of you." The next hour passed in a flurry of activity. Men took up positions behind hastily constructed barricades. Women and children were ushered into the sturdy brick building that housed the bank. Emma refused to take shelter, instead helping to distribute ammunition and water to the defenders. "You should be inside with the others," Dakota told her as she handed him a canteen. Emma shook her head, her jaw set in determination. "This is my home. These are my people. I won't hide while they fight." A peculiar expression crossed Dakota's face, something akin to admiration, tinged with concern. Your spirit is strong, Emma Sullivan. So is yours, she replied softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the chaos around them seemed to fade away. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of kindred souls despite the vast differences in their worlds. The moment was shattered by a shout from the town's edge. "Riders coming!" Dakota moved to a position behind an overturned wagon, bow at the ready, while Emma took cover in the doorway of her father's store. The approaching riders came into view. 6 men, as Dakota had predicted, their expressions grim and determined. They halted just beyond rifle range. One man, tall and broad-shouldered with a shock of red hair, urged his horse a few steps forward. "Name's Jack Burke," he shouted. "You've got our boss, Lyle Driscoll. Hand him over, and maybe we let some of you live." Marshal Blackwood stepped out from behind a barricade. "Driscoll's been sentenced to hang for his crimes, Burke. Turn around and ride away while you still can." Burke's laughter was cold. "Outnumbered, Marshal. We've got nothing to lose and everything to gain by burning this town to the ground. 5 rifles against 6 won't make much difference," Blackwood replied steadily. "But we've got something you want." At a signal, the deputies brought Driscoll out, still bound, a rifle pressed against his back. "Let me go, and I'll call him off," Driscoll shouted desperately. "You have my word." "Your word ain't worth spit," Blackwood replied. He addressed the gang again. "Here's the deal, Burke. You and your men turn around, ride away, and never come back to this territory. Driscoll gets a fair trial instead of a hanging. Otherwise, he dies first, before any of us." A tense silence fell over the standoff. Burke conferred quietly with his men, their expressions darkening. "You're bluffing," Burke finally called back. "You lawmen and your justice, you won't shoot an unarmed prisoner." What happened next occurred so quickly that many witnesses would later disagree on the exact sequence of events. Burke gave a subtle nod, and one of his men raised a rifle, aiming not at the marshal or his deputies, but at Emma, still visible in the doorway of the store. Dakota saw it happen as if time had slowed. With a fluid motion born of years of training, he rose, nocked an arrow, and loosed it in one continuous movement. The arrow struck the would-be assassin in the chest just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, splintering the wood beside Emma's head. Chaos erupted. Burke and his men charged forward, guns blazing. The defenders of redemption returned fire from behind their barricades. In the confusion, Driscoll broke free from his captors, diving behind a water trough as bullets whizzed overhead. Emma, recovering from her shock, grabbed a fallen deputy's revolver and took aim at a rider bearing down on her father's position. Her shot caught the man in the shoulder, sending him tumbling from his saddle. Dakota moved like a shadow through the battlefield, his arrows finding targets with unerring accuracy. 2 more of Burke's men fell before they realized the true threat among them was not in front of their guns, but moving silently between the buildings. Burke, seeing his advantage slipping away, spurred his horse directly toward the jail, where Driscoll had managed to take cover. "Boss, over here!" As Driscoll sprinted toward his lieutenant, Dakota stepped into his path, knife drawn. The 2 men circled each other, the battle raging around them momentarily forgotten. "You should have killed me when you had the chance, Injun," Driscoll snarled. "It is not too late to correct that mistake," Dakota replied, his voice deadly calm. They clashed in a flurry of movement, Driscoll's brute strength against Dakota's precision and speed. Blood flowed from cuts on both men as they grappled, neither gaining a clear advantage. Across the street, Emma saw Burke taking aim at Dakota's back. Without hesitation, she raised her revolver and fired. The bullet struck Burke's arm, causing his shot to go wide. Cursing, the outlaw swung his gun toward Emma. Joseph Sullivan, seeing his daughter in the line of fire, leaped from his position and tackled Burke. The 2 men crashed to the ground, wrestling for control of the weapon. "Pa!" Emma screamed as the gun discharged. Joseph staggered backward, crimson blossoming across his shirt. Burke rose, taking aim to finish the job, when 3 arrows pierced his chest in rapid succession. He stood for a moment, a look of surprise on his face before collapsing to the dust. Dakota, having finally subdued Driscoll with a blow to the head that left the outlaw unconscious, rushed to Joseph's side. Emma was already there, cradling her father's head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "Stay with us, Pa," she pleaded. "Please, stay with us." Joseph's breathing was labored, but his eyes were clear as they moved from his daughter to Dakota. Take care of her, he managed to whisper. Promise me. Dakota met the dying man's gaze and gave a solemn nod. I promise. As the gunfire died down, the remaining outlaws either dead or surrendering, a strange quiet fell over Redemption. The town had been defended, but at a terrible cost. And for Dakota and Emma, bound together by blood and promise, the future suddenly stretched before them, uncertain yet somehow shared. The week following the Battle of Redemption was marked by both mourning and rebuilding. 5 townspeople, including Joseph Sullivan, were laid to rest in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the settlement. Emma stood stoically beside each grave as Marshal Blackwood delivered simple but heartfelt eulogies, her grief a tangible presence that seemed to hover around her like a shadow. Dakota remained in town, despite the wary glances and whispered comments that followed him. He had given his word to a dying man, and such promises were sacred. Each day he helped with the repairs to buildings damaged in the gunfight, working tirelessly alongside men who gradually began to see beyond the color of his skin and the heritage that had once marked him as enemy. Emma reopened her father's store 3 days after the funeral, insisting that life must continue despite her loss. Customers found her changed, still kind and efficient, but with a newfound hardness in her eyes, a woman who had witnessed too much violence and felt too much pain in too short a time. You should eat, Dakota said quietly, entering the store just before closing time on the 7th day. He carried a bowl of stew from the hotel restaurant across the street. Emma looked up from the ledger she had been staring at for the past hour without recording a single entry. I'm not hungry. Your father would not want you to waste away with grief, he replied, setting the bowl before her. A flash of anger crossed her face. Don't tell me what my father would want, she snapped, then immediately regretted her harshness. I'm sorry. That was unfair. Dakota simply nodded, understanding in his dark eyes. Grief makes us say things we do not mean. Emma pushed aside the ledger and reluctantly pulled the bowl closer. Why are you still here, Dakota? Surely you need to return to your people. I gave my word. To a dying man. A promise made in the heat of battle. Emma stirred the stew absently. No one would fault you for returning to your tribe. Dakota was silent for a long moment. It is not only my promise that keeps me here, he finally said, his voice so low she had to lean forward to hear him. Before Emma could respond, the store door swung open with such force that it crashed against the wall. Marshal Blackwood stood in the doorway, his expression grim. Army patrol just rode in, he announced without preamble. Captain Wallace wants to see you, Dakota. Now. Emma rose to her feet. What's this about, Marshal? Blackwood wouldn't meet her eyes. Army's been tracking a group of renegade Apache. Burned a homestead about 30 miles north of here 3 days ago. Killed everyone. Man, woman, 2 children. And they believe Dakota is responsible? Emma's voice rose with indignation. That's ridiculous. He's been here, in town, helping us rebuild. I know that and you know that, Blackwood replied wearily. But Captain Wallace has orders to round up any Apache found off the reservation. Dakota's face betrayed no emotion, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight narrowing of his eyes. I will speak with this captain, he said calmly. Dakota, no, Emma began, but he silenced her with a gentle touch to her arm. Truth will speak for itself, he assured her. I have done nothing wrong. They walked together to the marshal's office where Captain Wallace and 4 soldiers waited. The captain was a tall, lean man with cold eyes and a permanently downturned mouth. He looked Dakota up and down with undisguised contempt. This the one? He asked Blackwood, as if Dakota were not standing right before him. This is Dakota, Blackwood confirmed. He's been in Redemption for over a week. Helped us fight off the Driscoll gang. Wallace seemed unimpressed. Indians stick together. Could have been sending signals to his friends, letting them know which homesteads were vulnerable. That's absurd, Emma interjected. Dakota saved my life. He helped save this entire town. Wallace finally acknowledged her presence with a dismissive glance. Ma'am, I understand you've been through a lot, but you don't know these people like I do. Apache can't be trusted. They're animals. The only animal I see in this room is wearing a uniform, Emma retorted, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. The captain's face darkened with anger. I've got orders to bring in any Apache found off the reservation. He's coming with us. To be questioned? Blackwood asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. To be dealt with according to military justice, Wallace replied coldly. Emma stepped between Dakota and the soldiers. He deserves a fair trial at the very least. Stand aside, miss, Wallace ordered, or I'll have you arrested for interfering with military operations. Captain, Dakota's voice cut through the tension like a knife. I will go with you willingly on one condition. You must promise that Emma Sullivan will not be harmed or imprisoned for speaking her mind. Wallace considered for a moment, then nodded curtly. Fine. The woman stays free, but you're coming with us now. As the soldiers moved to secure Dakota, Emma caught his arm. I won't let them do this, she whispered fiercely. I'll find a way to help you. Have faith, he replied softly. The Great Spirit has not guided our paths together only to separate them now. They led Dakota away, mounting him on a horse between two soldiers. Emma watched from the marshal's office, tears of fury and frustration streaming down her face. This isn't right, she said to Blackwood. You know it isn't. The marshal sighed heavily. No, it ain't right, but it's the way things are. Then things need to change, Emma replied, a new determination hardening her voice. And I'm going to start that change right now. Through the night, Emma worked feverishly, writing letters by lamplight. One to the territorial governor, whom her father had once helped during a supply shortage. One to a journalist in Tucson who had stayed at their store while investigating corruption in the cavalry. And one to Judge Harlan Stone, a fair-minded man who had dined at their table twice yearly on his circuit through the territory. As dawn broke, she saddled Penny and rode to the army camp set up just outside town. Captain Wallace was breaking his fast when she arrived, and his expression soured at the sight of her. Miss Sullivan, I thought we concluded our business yesterday. You concluded. I'm just beginning, Emma replied. She dropped a stack of sealed letters on the table before him. These will be dispatched today by riders to Tucson, Phoenix, and Santa Fe. They detail how an Apache man, who saved an entire town from outlaws, is being held without evidence or trial by a captain who seems more interested in vengeance than justice. Wallace's face reddened. Are you threatening me, miss? I'm promising you that if any harm comes to Dakota, your career and reputation will be finished. Emma met his gaze unflinchingly. My father had friends in high places, Captain. Influential friends who trusted his judgment, and now trust mine. A muscle twitched in Wallace's jaw. What exactly are you proposing? Release Dakota into Marshal Blackwood's custody pending a proper investigation. If evidence is found linking him to the attacks, he'll stand trial. If not, he goes free. The army doesn't take orders from shopkeepers' daughters, Wallace sneered. No, came a new voice, deep and authoritative. But it does answer to the law. They turned to see a man dismounting from a dusty horse. Judge Harlan Stone, his black robe folded over his saddle, approached with the steady gait of a man accustomed to command. Judge Stone. Emma greeted him, relief evident in her voice. I wasn't expecting you so soon. I was already on my way to redemption when I met your rider, the judge explained. Now what's this about an Apache being held without charges? Over the next hour, in the marshal's office, Emma recounted the entire story. From her rescue by Dakota to the battle with Driscoll's gang to Captain Wallace's arrival. Judge Stone listened attentively, occasionally asking questions of Blackwood to corroborate details. And where is this Apache now? He finally asked. In my jail, Blackwood replied. I convinced Wallace to leave him here until you arrived. Figured you'd want to talk to him yourself. Stone nodded thoughtfully. Bring him in. When Dakota entered, his hands bound before him, Emma had to suppress a cry of dismay. His face bore fresh bruises, and he moved with the stiffness of a man who had endured a severe beating. His eyes, however, remained clear and proud as they met hers briefly before focusing on the judge. Remove those restraints, Stone ordered, and Blackwood quickly complied. Now, young man, tell me your side of this story. Dakota spoke simply and directly, his perfect English clearly surprising the judge. He explained his presence near redemption, his intervention when he saw Emma attacked, and his subsequent role in defending the town. As for the attacked homestead, he concluded, I have not left this settlement since the battle with Driscoll's men. Many here can attest to this. Stone turned to Captain Wallace, who had been summoned to the proceedings. Do you have any actual evidence linking this man to the attacks, Captain? Witnesses? Tracks? Anything beyond the fact that he is Apache? Wallace shifted uncomfortably. The renegades were identified as Apache, Your Honor. So because some Apache committed a crime, all Apache are guilty? Stone's voice was sharp with disapproval. That's not how justice works in this territory, Captain. Not while I'm sitting on the bench. The next few hours saw a parade of townspeople offering testimony about Takoda's role in the battle, his help with the rebuilding, his constant presence in redemption during the days in question. Even those who had initially been suspicious of him spoke of his quiet dignity and tireless work. As the last witness concluded, Stone leaned back in his chair, his decision evident in his expression. I find no evidence to suggest that Takoda had any involvement in the Homestead attack. Furthermore, I find substantial evidence of his good character and positive contributions to this community. He is to be released immediately, with the court's apologies for his mistreatment. Wallace rose in protest, but Stone silenced him with a raised hand. Additionally, I am ordering an investigation into the conduct of Captain Wallace and his men. Beating a prisoner in custody is not acceptable behavior for representatives of the United States Army. As the gathering dispersed, Emma approached Takoda, relief washing over her like a cool breeze after a desert noon. It's over, she said softly. You're free. Takoda nodded, the hint of a smile touching his lips. Thanks to you. I couldn't let them take you, she replied simply. Not after everything, not after I gave my word to your father, he finished for her. Emma shook her head. Not only that, I couldn't let them take you because... She hesitated, then found her courage. Because you've come to mean something to me, Takoda. Something important. The world seemed to still around them as their eyes met. In that moment, the vast differences in their backgrounds, the conflicts between their peoples, the prejudices of society, all seemed to fade into insignificance. I must return to my people, Takoda said finally, regret evident in his voice, at least for a time, to explain my absence, to seek the wisdom of our elders. Emma's heart sank, though she had known this moment would come. I understand, but I will return, he continued, his hand gently lifting her chin so their eyes met once more. If you will have me, I will wait, Emma promised, for as long as it takes. 3 weeks later, as the first autumn leaves began to fall, Emma stood on the porch of her store, watching a lone rider approach from the east. The townspeople, going about their daily business, paused as Takoda rode slowly down the main street. But this time, there were no fearful whispers, no hands moving instinctively toward weapons. Instead, several men nodded in greeting, and Mrs. Patterson, the baker's wife, actually waved. Takoda dismounted before the store, his dark eyes finding Emma immediately. He wore traditional Apache clothing, but also a cavalry-style jacket, a symbol perhaps of his existence in two worlds. You came back, Emma said, joy illuminating her face. I promised I would, he replied simply. And your people? What did they say? A smile, rare and precious, transformed Takoda's face. Our medicine man had a vision of this, of us. He says our paths were meant to join, to show others that peace is possible. Emma descended the steps, stopping just before him. And what do you say, Takoda? He reached out, taking her hands in his. I say that the Great Spirit has given us a gift, a chance to build something new together, something that honors both our worlds while creating something uniquely our own. It won't be easy, Emma cautioned. There will be those who disapprove, who try to keep us apart. Nothing worth having comes without struggle, Takoda replied. But we are both strong. Together we are stronger still. As he drew her into his arms, the future stretched before them, uncertain, challenging, but bright with possibility. In a land torn by conflict and prejudice, their love stood as a beacon of hope, a testament to the truth that the human heart recognizes no boundaries of race or culture when it finds its match. And in redemption, a town living up to its name, a new chapter began, not just for Emma and Takoda, but for all who witnessed their courage in choosing love over fear, understanding over ignorance, and hope over hate.